In just a moment, we join Marvin Miller backstage in Mischa Elman's dressing room. Mr. Miller will present Mischa Elman to this audience of the Armed Forces Radio Service. And now, here is Marvin Miller.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. To fill in the moments before Mr. Elman can reach his dressing room through the throngs of friends and admirers who have crowded backstage, we have a few things to say, advancing some reasons, perhaps, why Mischa Elman has remained such a popular figure on the concert stage for so many years. The best reason, of course, stems from Mischa Elman's magical tone, the singing tone, which has won him worldwide acclaim. His many appearances before the peoples of both continents and many out-of-the-way places has brought forth almost the same comment about his artistry. It seems to be universally voiced, this opinion, which states simply that Mischa Elman has a personal way of playing. He seems to be performing just for you and you alone. He's not the kind of virtuoso who stands off in his own world of music, his own magenta cloud number 8, but rather he brings the magic and beauty of his violin to everyone. And now I see Mr. Elman coming this way and entering his dressing room where the facilities of Armed Forces Radio Service are mixed along with Mr. Elman's personal paraphernalia, including a violin case, into which Mischa Elman will presently store his famous Stradivari violin.
Good evening, Mr. Miller. I'm sorry I was detained.
Oh, not at all, Mr. Elman. May I add my congratulations to those of our listeners for that fine performance of Tchaikovsky, and particularly for that magnificent piece of quick thinking and legerdemain during the last movement when the E string on your violin broke and you made an instantaneous switch with Concertmaster Jacobson without even missing a beat. That really took some fast thinking on your feet.
Well, you have to think very fast when you're on the stage.
Do you run into emergencies like that very often?
I hope it doesn't happen too often.
Well, I was very much impressed because I'm sure that many of our listeners in the bowl had absolutely no idea that you had that misfortune and had actually made the switch. By the way, we don't like to call these interviews, Mr. Elman. That term sounds a little frightening, a little bit stiff. So shall we just sit around and talk?
I shall be delighted.
Well, I think we could fill these intermission times very capably by talking about your long career in music.
I hope we don't put your listeners to sleep. 45 years is a long time to talk about, you know.
Oh, I shouldn't worry about that if I were you. First, we'll get underway with a question, then we'll just let things ramble from there.
All right.
Okay.
Question number 1.
Well, question number 1 is, did your parents make you work and slave at your violin when you were young?
They never tried to make a slave of me, especially to my instrument.
Uh-huh. Well, did you ever have any other ambition than to be a great violinist or a great musician?
I was 5 years of age when I started.
Oh?
Well, you don't think that a 5-year boy has any ambitions.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. At 5, I think my son wanted to be the engineer. Mr. Elman, what I mean is the conventional cartoon in America, in the magazines and the newspapers, always shows the budding violinist being heckled by other kids of his own age to throw away the fiddle and bow and put on a baseball mitt. Now, is that true in your case, Mr. Elman? You didn't have to be pressed into practicing.
Since I was born in Europe and started my musical education there, this did not exist in Europe. We were not brought up according to a certain pattern, the way children are being brought up here in this country.
Oh, really? Actually more individualism?
Much more individualism, although we preach individualism here, but I find that all the women wear the same hats. All the boys have to do the same things. They all have to drive cars, etc., you know. Parents have to bring up their children the way the neighbor brings them up. So, I mean, you see, I don't call that individualism.
Well, that's a very interesting observation, Mr. Elman. Where did you make your public debut?
I played my I made my debut in Berlin.
Oh, in Berlin?
Yes.
Well, that was one of the principal music centers of the world at that time, wasn't it?
Oh, definitely. It was the center. And the whole world looked up to what Berlin had to say about any musical star.
I suppose the audiences were very critical. They stood there and they sat there and challenged you to really play for them, huh?
Well, you had to be very versatile, you know, and be able to play the classics well before they really give you proper recognition.
Well, then, in other words, you picked the worst, probably, or the best, from the point of view, city in which to make your debut that you possibly could have with so critical an audience.
We knew that once you were recognized there, then you could go through with greater ease all over the world.
I see. And then after your success in Berlin, you were invited to play in London. Is that right?
Yes, right after that.
Mm-hmm. That was in 1905, I believe, according to my notes.
Yes, exactly.
And what was the orchestra at that time in London? Do you recall?
I played with the London Symphony Orchestra.
Uh-huh. Who was the conductor?
A man by the name Williams.
Williams. That, no relation to Vaughan Williams.
No, not at all. I don't know where he is even now. But at that time, he just started to... he just started his career.
How did you like London audiences?
The audiences in London are the most enthusiastic audiences, I would say, in the world.
Oh, really?
Yes. The English people in life are supposed to be rather restrained and reserved, but not when they have an opportunity for an outlet.
Oh, really?
And yes, the music is a tremendous outlet for them.
Make you play a lot of encores?
Oh, yes.
Well, I know you've always been very gracious about that in your concerts, Mr. Elman. Well, that's a wonderful feeling, I know, when you have an audience join with you and cooperate and feel with you in the interpretation of a great musical number, and I know that a lot of concert artists would like to feel more of it. Before you came in, Mr. Elman, I was telling our audience about how you seem to bring the people into your musical world. Your playing has always been that way, Mr. Elman, because you want everyone to enjoy the music you play the same way you enjoy it. Is that true?
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I'm glad it seems that way, because that's what music should be, a personal and living part of everyone.
Well, when did audiences in this country, in America, first hear the famous Elman tone on your famous Stradivari?
I came to America first in 1908, and again a year later. Ever since then, I have hopped back and forth between Europe and this country.
And where else?
I've been in Australia, South Africa, back to my birthplace, Russia, and just about everywhere. It's been a rich experience.
Well, now, before we go, Mr. Elman, can you remember any particular concert in some out-of-the-way place, say in some small town or maybe in some small country that has an especial niche in your memory?
Well, I consider one of the greatest compliments that has ever been paid to me was paid to me by a soldier. I played, as you know, a great deal in various camps.
Mm-hmm.
And in one of the camps, after I got through playing, a soldier came up to me and asked me for an autograph. And while I was giving him my autograph, he turned to me and said, if I can hear music like this for the rest of my life, I wouldn't mind at all to remain here in the Army.
Say, that is a compliment, as many of our audience tonight will certainly agree. Well, that was an experience, and I'm sorry. I see now that our time is just about over, Mr. Elman. The lights are flashing, which means our intermission time is through. We wish to thank you very much for spending these moments with us, and I hope that when you come back to Hollywood Bowl again next year, you'll drop back and say hello.
The pleasure was all mine. I've enjoyed talking to everyone over this Armed Forces Radio Service network, because I know what splendid work it did all through the war and is still doing. It's a good thing sending these fine programs from Hollywood Bowl to the hospitals in this country and to all the men and women in service throughout the world. Thank you very much for asking me to spend this time with you, Mr. Miller.
Oh, it's been our very great pleasure. Thank you again, Mr. Elman, for these informal moments of conversation. This is Marvin Miller bidding you good night until another intermission time.